is this issue that you ask about, and it's not going well, except with respect to the Kurd region.
Christopher, somewhat related, is there ever a good reason to have an ethnically characterized federalist system? And is that what we're going to have in Iraq?
Well, the situation in Iraq reminds me of the apples and pears, to borrow his analogy, that was applied in the case of Bosnia-Herzegovina. If you remember, you were told every day during the fighting there that there was the Serbs, the Croats, and the Muslims. What's wrong with that trinity, as it were? They're not comparing like with like. I used to wish, actually, that it was the other way around, and people would say the Orthodox, the Catholics, and the Bosnians, which would have been actually slightly more accurate. It would be very nice to see the newspapers saying today the Christian Orthodox shelled Sarajevo again. It would have been better than criminalizing all the Serbs for that action, and much more true to the actual spirit of what was being done. Or that yesterday the Roman Catholics again trained their artillery on the city of Mostar instead of the Croats. And it would have been much more true to say the Bosnians than the Muslims, certainly in the case of Sarajevo. But everyone got that all wrong all the time with terrible consequences. And it also it trained us in ghettoizing our own minds as well as the life of the people of the Balkans. Well, the same thing is being done in Iraq. The Kurds, for example, are, to not 100% extent, but I think at least 70% Sunni people, not just in Iraq, but in Turkey and Syria and elsewhere. But it's always the Kurds, the Sunni, and the Shia, if you notice. There's a very big split between the Shia parties as to those who take something like a Khomeinist view of their religion. That's to say, the Velayat-i Faqih, the Shia principle that the mullahs should be the parents and guardians of the entire state and society, and those who don't, who take the view of Ayatollah Sistani. There's no unified Shia view, therefore. An enormous number of Sunnis welcomed the overthrow of Saddam Hussein and still do. And so the whole picture, as partitioned in this way, in our minds and on the ground, is in some ways fundamentally misleading. And the only ethnic question is that of Kurdistan, the largest minority in the country and the largest minority in the region. Even the Saddam Hussein constitution described Iraq as a state of Arabs and Kurds, not as an Arab state. Iraq is a member of the Arab League, but it's described as a state of Arabs and Kurds. I don't think there's any alternative to ethnicizing it to that extent. I mean, it would be impossible not to say that there was a non-Arab people within Iraq's border, and the European Union is increasingly insisting that Turkey makes the same avowal and admission in its own political arrangements. So I just wish it could be done without this relentless categorization that I think has helped in the way we formulate it to reproduce itself in actual Iraqi conditions, and is creating a situation where people more and more must think of themselves in terms of identity politics.
Can I say something constructive to that? Not argue anything, but just add. The fact is that, and I agree actually with what you just said, but the fact is that it has become more ethnicized, and it has become ethnicized in part because that's how the American occupying authority has dealt with the various Iraqi groups. And it has become ethnicized also because in response to Kurdish claims, the others have made similar claims. Now, the problem is ethnicity, geography, and resources. I mean, there are three things which are involved here. I think everybody knows this because I think people who read the newspaper know that Kurdistan and the south and the southeast have oil, but the Sunni provinces, the three major Sunni provinces, and of course Baghdad, have none. Roughly, because no one knows what the amounts are in terms of future resources, one could say 50-50-0. But it could be a little different than that. It could be 40-0, 60, or 60-0, 40. Let's say 50-0, 50. Now, once the Kurdistan region is conceded, with the likelihood that it's going to control, and in the new constitution, as far as future resources are concerned, it is going to control its own oil resources. That means that from a point of view of the Shiite religious leadership, that particular province, that region with 3 provinces, but only 22%, 23% of the people is getting 50% of the oil. That's 50% of the resources taken out of the country by a quarter of the population. They themselves have 50% of the people and let's say 50% of the oil. From their point of view now, they have to share, if they share that with the other 25% of the population, that's a formula for the continued impoverishment of their own region, which is the poorest actually in Iraq. So their answer to it, which in fact Iranian policy has strongly supported, okay, the Kurds have their region, we have our region, ethnically based also. So instead of what would be reasonable, namely a provincially based federal system for Iraq as a whole, or even Kurdistan and a provincially based federal system for the Arab part of Iraq, they have raised the demand of a ethnically based regional system for the south, whether that is 9 provinces, as in one of the demands, or 3 or 6. Actually, it is 6 in the current version, but doesn't really much matter because the oil is always in that particular package. That's a formula for the total impoverishment of the Sunni provinces, and from the American point of view, a formula for perpetual civil war. So ethnicization is also the problem of resources, and with the concession of Kurdistan, as reasonable as that may be from a historical point of view, the ethnicization and the regionalization of Iraqi politics has been almost unavoidable. But with that turn, we cannot find a reasonable solution for the kind of problem that we are confronting, and Americans are going to be dying, literally, for many years to come if they seek to manage this type of reorganization of the country, because it cannot really be managed.
We're going to move on now to discussing the United States in particular.
But ask him because I just spoke, so he should go next.
Sure, all right. Christopher, as I understand neoconservatism, and I admit I'm not at all an expert, there is an idea of supporting the project of American power and influence, particularly in the Middle East, and to do so by force if necessary. At least part of this rationale, and a very serious one for you, I know, is because of a fear of radical religiosity, or Islamic fascism, as you term it. However, in the United States, the neoconservatives are allied in the Republican Party with the religious right. At what point are the neoconservatives and the religious right going to come to a head? Is this going to happen? Is this going to lead to a division in the party?
Well, to begin with, there's no faction in American politics, or no important faction, that isn't in favor of using force in the Middle East, or that hasn't repeatedly had recourse to it. To say that they're willing to use force for American power would be a definition of anyone running for office in any one of the 2 houses or seeking the nomination for the presidency. That's not what distinguishes the so-called neoconservative view. That's distinguished, in my opinion, in this way. When I first ran across this school, so-called, it was in the early Reagan years, it was mainly distinguished by an attachment to it's wrong to call it a theory, but a notion of Jean Kirkpatrick's, a famous essay on dictatorships and double standards, which suggested that the United States should be more lenient on dictatorships that she called authoritarian, tending as they were to be pro-American, than on those that were totalitarian, those that demanded a complete conscription of society and of the citizen into the state. Thus, in practice, meaning go easy on Pinochet, on General Marcos, President Marcos, I mean, people of that stripe and kidney. But there's been an unnoticed metamorphosis in this over the last couple of decades, attributable mainly to Paul Wolfowitz, who actually, in the course of the Reagan administration, won an argument with Jean Kirkpatrick